Welcome to the Corporate Venturing Insider Series, where I interview top practitioners in the CVC world and learn with you the best practices and golden nuggets that they have accumulated over their career. In this episode, we will be learning from Jennifer Ard, Managing Director at Intel Capital. Jennifer, could you take a few minutes to share your story and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, happy to. And thanks for having me, Nicola. I really appreciate it. I've had the pleasure to work with Nicola on an investment that is yet to be disclosed. So I had a great time working with you so far. So a little bit about me. I joined Intel 16 years ago, straight out of business school. I joined in the corporate finance role. I had never had corporate venturing or venture capital on my radar. I went to business school. I assumed I was going to do corporate finance for the rest of my life. I joined and went through a rotation program. We have a rotation program within our finance program at Intel and rotated through several different business units. And then landed in a group called New Business Initiatives, which has evolved a little bit into Intel, but it's really about incubating new businesses within Intel to help grow different new ideas within Intel. And so I was working with teams that were essentially acting as startups within Intel, which was a great opportunity. And part of that is we were working on an e-commerce business, really looking at making a PC a very secure point of sale terminal. And as part of that, we engaged with a startup company that ultimately needed some capital. So we connected with Intel Capital and started talking to them about, hey, what would it take to get funding to the company? And I ended up working with the deal team, with the investor, with the finance controller on making that investment, and went to the investment committee and helped pitch that idea that we ultimately invested in. And that was really my first exposure to Intel Capital, and really thought, hey, this is pretty cool that they're out there working with startups. Might be a fun place to land. And then fast forward about a year, and the controller who I'd worked with reached out and said, hey, we have a finance job open in Intel Capital. Why don't you come apply? So I thought that would actually be fun. So I joined Intel Capital. That's been about 10 years ago at this point. And I started working with a team that was making investments into manufacturing companies. So things that supported really the core of our fabrication process, which VCs, not a lot of them invest in really hard kind of technology, but it's materials, chems, gases, all of the really maybe not super exciting VC areas, but it's actually a really fun place to work. And then about 4 months ago, I moved into this managing director role that's head of operations, which is a brand new role for me. And 4 months in, I'm still not exactly sure what I'm doing, and still drinking from the fire hose, but it's really around helping operationally, making sure that we operate efficiently.
Thank you, Jen. Do you have maybe some best practices you've seen at Intel Capital about how best to interact with business units where they see the value and there's high level of engagement, but not to the point where it becomes counterproductive?
Yeah, it is a fine balance that these startup companies, not all of them are at the stage or have the capability to handle all of Intel going and infiltrating. So I think the number one thing I'd recommend is just staying flexible, because if you go in there with a model that says every single deal you do has to have this very specific type of engagement, I think that's where you get into problems. And I think part of the value of the CVC is being able to be the eyes and ears of the company to address and find trends ahead of where your business units are working. I think that's just one of the huge benefits of having a CVC. And that's honestly one of the big focus areas that we have moving forward around how do we take all of that learning we're seeing from what's getting funded and who's investing and what are the big trends, and driving that back to Intel. I even think we can do better at that.
So for me, this is the first golden nugget of this interview, because many people will see Intel Capital as a big operation, and it is a big operation. And they would assume that you follow a very rigid process and everything looks the same. But actually, you need this agility of looking at every investment with a view of it's going to be different. This is really, for me, a golden nugget. So we talk about strategic and financial. And if you listen to my interviews before, I actually don't like this binary question of are you strategic or financial? Because at the end, you need to pick the winners. And the winners will add the strategic value and a high correlation on the financial return. So it's always about the overlap. Yep. How do you see this overlap playing over time?
Yeah, I think they are so tightly coupled. In fact, back when I joined Intel Capital 10 years ago, as every CVC has our overview deck, and we literally had that slide that said Intel Capital plays in the middle of these. And I think that's absolutely true. I have seen examples of companies that are super strategic to Intel, to the point maybe we are their only customer. And you make the argument Intel changes its roadmap or maybe don't order as many tools, the company's out of business. There's no way that they're going to survive. And then I think on the complete opposite end, we could be investing in like B2C consumer internet companies, but what are we going to do to help them? Absolutely nothing. So the two have to be married. You have to find the category winners that will then drive strategic value to the company. You cannot look at these two independently, and you can't go to either extreme on the financial side or on the strategic side. Otherwise, why would Intel want to be my LP? They have to find strategic benefit, but they also need to see financial returns from that as well. We can't be losing money either.
Absolutely. And what's interesting is when I started being in corporate venturing, which was just 2 years ago, many people talk to me about Intel Capital as shifting between being more strategic, being more financial. And I think it's a total misreading of the situation. It was more about how much independence do you get from business units, but it was never about compromising on financial or strategic per se. Can you talk a bit more about this?
Yeah, we transitioned probably, I guess it was mid 2018. So I guess at this point, it's about 2 years ago. Part of what we really were finding is when you are on the end of the very strategically aligned, you move a little bit slower, right? If you're always out there trying to find the business unit angle and making sure you have business unit champions and that they're able to attend your investment committee meetings and speak for the company, the industry moves quickly. You miss deals, right? You're not able to close deals quickly, and you're not able to actually then realize all that strategic value you were searching for. With our last Intel Capital lead, he said that first of all, we have to be able to move quickly within the ecosystem. We have to be able to respond quickly. It's not that these companies have endless cash runways. We have to be able to work within the confines of the venture capital world to be able to win deals. And if you're investing in category leaders, you're winning deals from really big financial VCs or other CVCs. We have to compete. The other piece of it is that when we were investing previously, we were really taking eyes and ears approach where we felt like we were going to put little money in lots of companies. So in any given year, we were investing in significantly more companies than we are now. And we really decided that what we wanted to do was pick category winners and make them category winners. We were going to put in place a much bigger concerted effort to help those companies grow and develop and become financially profitable over time. So what we really pivoted to is taking a more active, engaged investment role. So we started putting more money to work. So rather than writing 1 to 3 or 5 million check sizes, now our average check size is somewhere between $5 and $15 million. And we also used to do follow-on. We would price some deals, but we definitely were not taking the lead in pricing deals. Now we lead 75% of the deals that we do. Previously, we took board observer roles, and now we said, hey, if we're really going to impact these companies, we're going to take board seats, and we are going to be right at the forefront of helping these company growth. And then we also put in place a really strong portfolio development team where we have hired several people who are out working with our field sales team. They are integrating with the business units. They are working with our product teams. They're setting up technology days where our portfolio companies come in and present to Intel. Instead of us investing in a ton of companies over time and then investing and forgetting, clearly the investors don't forget about it. We know about all of our companies. We want to take bigger stakes and make more of an impact doing that. Why would Intel as an LP fund a completely non-strategic venture arm? We really needed to stay strategic, but again, in order to be strategic, like we were just talking about, you have to be able to go out and win the best deals. You have to be able to help them succeed and grow, and doing that across 50 to 60 investment a year, it wasn't happening. And so we really honed in on, we're finding category leaders, we're putting money to work, and we're making them the winners. And it has resonated with founders. They find that we're much more engaged. They really enjoy having us on boards. They find great strategic value with our portfolio development team helping them grow and change.
And to have more influence, I think you also have diversity influence into your portfolio companies more than before.
Yes, happy to talk about diversity just in general too, because I think as the venture capital world, which I think CVCs maybe haven't been as much a part of the diversity conversation within the venture world, we've also been on the forefront of diversity, right? About 4 years ago, we announced we were going to invest 125 million in diverse owned and operated businesses. And we exceeded that goal in half the time and have really tried to integrate. We need to be investing in diverse founders. And I think about diversity a few ways. One is just what businesses are getting funded, putting money into diverse founders and really finding companies that are being run by good, diverse founders. The second is just getting diversity on your own team. We look around the room at your own team and say, do we have a diverse team in our hiring practices and how we develop and mentor people? And then the last piece is investing alongside diversity. We really look around and say, are the check writers we're syndicating with, is there diversity around the table? And we're firm believers that having a diverse set of people around the table makes better decisions.
That's very nice. And I hope Intel Capital continues in that really good direction. I want to talk about the investment committee as well, because you're a big operation. I think you have 40 investment directors who can make deals. How many deals do you do per year? New deals, not follow.
We do about 30 to 40 new investments and then follow-ons on top of that.
So that means that on average, you have 1 to 2 investments per investment director, which means they will have research and then they go to the investment committee with something really nicely packaged. My first question is, how often does the investment committee decline an investment? Does that happen a lot or not?
It actually does happen a lot. So what we have done is we have domains. So we invest and have 5 different domains that, these are fluid and changing as every VC. We have our investment thesis and our areas where we invest, and those are adapting over time based on needs. So right now we have 5 domains. Each of those domains has a partner who is in charge of the domain, and they run domain meetings. So the initial pass of those companies and those investments happens within our domain meetings. The partner sees it. All of the direct investment directors who work on that deal see it. They all opine. It's the domain meeting. They hate your company. You can still take it to investment committee. That's your prerogative. Also, what happens in those domains are they help develop the investment thesis, and that's where investment theses are really formed and developed. So those are all reviewed in domain meetings. So that's the first filter. Then they go to investment committee. And I will still say, because I now own all these statistics, we still decline 25 to 30% of the deals that come into investment committee. And that's after they've been filtered through.
Really a healthy ratio, because it means that there's still a point to check there's a good fit with what Intel wants to get to.
Yep. And we do a 2-part process. We get through our first deal concept meeting. Oftentimes coming out of that, there's a list. At Intel, we call them ARs. So there's a whole list of action items you've got to go figure out. And then the final investment committee meeting is really around addressing all of those action items.
Very nice. And so you have a 2-step approach. The first one is to talk about the deal, what you've learned, and the investment committee gives feedback about possible blind spots or risks or concerns. And then you have the second step, which is really a formal approval. Is that the best practice in your view to do a 2-step approach, or do you think 1-step approach is also valid?
It is a really good approach. And here's why. If a deal team does all of the work that they would need to do to close a deal, they're doing too much work ahead of actually getting a temperature check.
Very nice. I'm wondering if you have a view about the voting process, and afterwards, is it when you didn't have everyone voting the same way that actually get the best deals, or do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I do. Then in the transformation of 2018, we put in place a partnership because we looked externally and said, hey, that multiple voices around the table is the right way to look at a deal. So we have 5 partners, 5 senior managing directors or partners, all have various levels of backgrounds and focus areas. They focus across our domains. We have one who's really 5G focused. We have one that's intelligent edge focused, cloud infrastructure, enterprise application. They have experience across the board. Just given that they're also doing investments, scheduling wise, we can't get 5 people in every single investment committee. So the way we've done it is we have to have 3 partners or 3 senior managing directors on any committee. So 3 are assigned to each deal. We keep that committee consistent between first and second meeting so that you're not having to go back and re-educate somebody who was not at the first. So we always have the same committee between the first and the second meeting. We also have a CFO delegate who is our finance director. We call him our CFO within Intel Capital, but he is the CFO delegate. He also gets a vote. So we have 4 people on our investment committee. Within those partners, you have to have a majority, so 2 of the 3. So there are definitely times when one of the committee members will vote against a deal and it can still move forward. But we felt the same way, that we should be able to have people who have conviction and people who don't have conviction being able to voice those opinions.
Very nice. And I think you mentioned to me that no partner can vote on their own deals they're proposing.
Yeah, so we think of our partners as player coaches, right? They're not just sitting up there approving deals, they're working on their own deal flow and they have great industry contacts. We have some who have 20 years of investment experience. I don't know if any of them are up to 30 years. They clearly have better deal flow than anybody else in the whole organization and are sitting on boards and are engaging with companies. They are working on their own deals. Clearly, any deal they'll pull in the associates, the analysts, they find that it's a great training opportunity for them to be bringing in less experienced investment directors or even partnering with managing directors who they want to partner up with. So yes, if you own a deal, you're not allowed to vote on it. So if you're part of the deal team, you don't get to be a voting member of the MRC. We don't let you play both of those.
It makes a lot of sense. Actually, one thing you talked about is raising the bar for the team and the associates and so on. So at TDK Ventures, whenever we have the investment committee, I set a very simple rule. The investment director who's proposing the deal is the only one who can speak, but everyone else can join and listen in so that they understand what the investment committee is saying, what they like, what they don't like, and we all learn at the same time. How many people join this investment committee and can learn from this experience?
We actually have a very large deal meeting. We feel the same way. We want to be able to let people learn. So who we have in our investment committee is the deal team. That can be 2 or 3 different people. Generally, it's analysts or associates. We actually have a rotation through our associates. We have one associate who will attend the committee for 6 months. That person also tracks stats. So they're tracking like what is happening in our investment committee, who's voting. All of that comes out in minutes, but they're capturing all of that too. So part of it is just that we're using them as tracking. I attend all of those as the head of investment operations. I am probably the only one who attends all of them. So I'm the consistent view of who sees what's on a deal. I'm not a voting member of our committee, but I see everything that's coming in. Then we have our investment committee members, including finance. And then what we've started doing is 2-week rotations through our investment committee with our investors. So we've said over the years, you probably have only attended your own investment meetings. And so you don't know how other investors are coming in presenting things, and you don't know how the investment committee is responding to things in different sectors. So we started doing 2-week rotations. So we have investors, and the way we run our investment committees is you have to publish materials 2 days ahead of that meeting. And the committee members have read through every piece of material and have asked questions ahead of time. So it's not that the investor is like pitching it for the first time. The committee has seen it all. And the expectation for people doing their rotations is that they've read through all the materials and they're asking questions, engaged. So we have a lot of people sitting in our investment committee. But again, it's a good dialogue and an opportunity to teach people and make sure we're being consistent across the organization.
It's very nice. What I'm realizing from this discussion is Intel Capital is in this continuous improvements and thinking about new processes. This is really cool. Like I said at the beginning, you're about to celebrate 30 years old in January for Intel Capital, and yet you're still thinking about how to improve the process and raise the bar.
Yeah, I think you have to be. And I will say we implement things that are failures.
Give one example.
One of the things we did, we said all of the investors can go do any deal, right? If you're an investor, you're not tied to a specific silo. So if you can find deal flow in a sector that is not yours, by all means. So we basically told everybody, go for it. Go do any deal you want. And then what we were finding is people were bringing in deals in ecosystems they knew nothing about. So Then we started saying, if you're doing an investment in a domain you don't know anything about, you have to bring in somebody who is a domain expert so that you're partnering on the deal. And then we've gone a step further to put in place these domain meetings. You can do any deal you want. You are at liberty to go get deal flow from wherever, but there are processes in place so that you're still investing in the thesis, and we're not just bringing in a bunch of intelligent edge deals that don't relate to each other. It all still has to come back to the investment thesis. So I will say that's one thing where we're just like, go do deals. And then we were like, oh, wait, we need to put a few more parameters around it. So we've come around a few things and said, okay, maybe we didn't need to go back to that extreme. Maybe let's do something else.
Really acting like a startup. You try saying it doesn't work, you pivot quickly. That's really cool. Now, Intercapital is also one of these corporate VC where you have a wide spectrum of areas of investments, which are very different between them. Is that a case where you should have one or multiple investment theses?
So right now we have 5 domains, and these change over time. They are very thesis driven. One of our domains is 5G, intelligent edge, and autonomy. So there's a lot packed into that, right? And I will say within that one sector, we have thesis around 5G. So what are the things we really need to be helping and driving with 5G? That team is heavily engaged with our 5G team. We have our IoT team that those investors are really engaged with our IoT team. And then autonomy, we have Mobileye. They're all interrelated because clearly an intelligent edge solution has a huge amount of 5G implications. So they're meeting together and comparing, but there's separate thesis on all of them. So those evolve over time. And it's not that we will continue to have 5 domains for the rest of our lives. We'll be flexible, but we feel like these areas that we're investing in right now are a very good intersection between what's investable in the space, because there are things Intel does that we just have found, like either there's IP risk, we just can't invest in a startup because Intel's developing its own IP. There's areas that are not investable. So are they investable and are they strategic? And these are the areas that we've talked about. The process for getting a new domain or a new thesis in place is you go to the investment committee, and we generally try to have everybody in those meetings. So it's not just 3, but we try to find time either during partner meeting or investment committee where people come in and actually present the investment thesis, and we talk about the domain. And a lot of times they'll go back and find more information, and we'll have those discussions, but we don't take that lightly. And we really make sure that we're trying to invest in key areas that are strategic and financial goals.
Very nice. I'm sure you have a lot of best practices that you've seen. What would be 1 or 2 tips, maybe that relates more to a corporate VC? So do you have best practices that you can share?
Yeah, we could probably talk about board engagement for hours, to be completely honest. The first thing I will say is your legal department needs to be involved in decisions around whether your CVC should take board seats or not, right? There's a reputation among CVCs around, if I share information with somebody, it's going to get back to the business units. And we several years ago put in place a very clear, very different Intel Capital NDA that says, if you share information with your Intel Capital person, it is not going back to the business unit. And the examples that are extreme, but where founders are really sensitive, is if it's a manufacturing company that's our supplier and they tell me what their costs are, and then I go tell our manufacturing team how to negotiate, that's absolutely a way to, first of all, get yourself sued, and second of all, to just destroy all trust you have with your portfolio company.
Very nice. So we are getting to the top of the hour, and I want to talk about something you look forward to the future. So in your new role, which is a COO role, and you've been working with other people in similar roles in different organizations, what is your 1 or 2 goals you aim to achieve in the coming years?
Great question. What I want to do is make Intel Capital run better, whether that's making us more efficient, making us more attractive to founders, making us a better, well-oiled machine. Right now, we have extremely professional team, but whatever I can do to help us be able to pick up best practices from other CVCs, from other VCs, and being really able to implement that and make us better investors.
And when you talk to other COOs, is there one best practice that was not obvious? And when you heard it, you're like, okay, I'm going to do it.
Not really. What's interesting to me is everybody has their own way of doing things. Every structure that's set up is completely different. You need flexibility to be able to do things.
Perfect. I think it's a great way to end up this interview. Jen, you were fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you. Bye.